I'm supposed to do introductions. My name's Robert Forster, Paul Kelly, and Paul's written a fabulous book called How to Make Gravy. And for the next hour, I'm going to be asking Paul some questions about the book. And I've read the book over the last couple of weeks, loved it.
Thank you.
And it's the most, it's a personal statement. There's probably outside or different to the songs that you've written. And over the last week or so, last couple of weeks, you've been doing a lot of mainstream media. And I wonder how it is to have written something so personal and to be dealing and being interviewed by a wide media, and how that feels.
Well, it's still early days. I just started, and it is a bit different. I mean, when you get interviewed for a record you've put out, you do get asked. You get asked personal questions anyway.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm often pointing out to interviewers, well, my songs are fiction, so these personal questions you ask me aren't that relevant. I haven't really got that to fall back on anymore. So
that's what I mean.
So I think I'm still working it out. I didn't quite know what I was doing when I started writing the book. The book happened by accident. At some point I realised this is an autobiography, this is a memoir, and I felt I had to honour that and be frank and forthright where I could. And so I understand that if I'm going to go out and talk about the book, I'm going to get asked probably more personal questions than usual. So, but
and how's it going so far?
I had a tough one with Kerry O'Brien.
Yeah. But you came out of it very well, because people have... I didn't see it, but I've read the transcript, and I've met people that saw it, and everyone thought you were great. You know, the way you handled it and what you said.
Yeah, in retrospect, I think I maybe blocked him a little bit, which is, I think he was doing his job, and so I thought I was prepared for some of the questions he was asking, but I wasn't prepared for question number 5 and 6 and 7 on the same topic. So... But I think it was actually good for me to do that, because I think I learned something from it.
And so how did it come about?
Well, it started with music. It started with really started with a series of shows called the A to Z shows, which I started playing in 2004. And the first one I did was at the Spiegel Tent in Melbourne, and my understanding at the time was that it would be a one-off event, and I had this, sort of silly idea to sing 100 of my songs over 4 nights in alphabetical order by title, and I did it. And after I'd done it, I realised that it was I'd found a new way to play my songs. I'd found a way to change audiences' expectations of what coming to a show would be. And I knew I'd found a way to get in touch with a lot of my older songs that I'd just lost touch with. Not because the songs weren't any good, but because the demands of structuring a show always meant you had to have the balance of the new record you were playing and then a mix of old songs that people knew. So a lot of old songs that weren't the popular songs were just sort of gathering dust.
Yeah.
So I realised, okay, I'm onto something here. I've got a new way to do my songs, and so I continued to do the shows. I started doing these A to Z shows maybe once or twice a year, and just recorded them as I went, and then thought, it'd probably be good to release these recordings at some stage as a kind of box set, and started thinking about that, and thought, well, if I'm going to put out a box set, I need to make a really nice booklet to go with the box set. So So I thought, well, maybe I'll write some liner notes and, some notes on the songs, talk about influences, have some pictures. And I sat down with the alphabetical order in mind and started writing some notes on Adelaide.
Yeah.
And I wrote a couple of pages, and then I thought, okay, I'll write on the next song. And then I realised, this could be a book.
Yep.
So it really changed. The booklet became a book.
Right.
I've now had the problem of working out what to do for the booklet with the box set. So I just made a whole lot of pictures.
Right. And did you write the song? You do the songs in the show from A to Z, and you started with Adelaide when you were writing the notes. Did you then write? Is the book written in order, or did you start? Did you get to B, and then that clipped off a song that starts with S, and then, or did you write it in order?
I pretty much wrote it in order all the time, thinking I might have to write it out of order. I wasn't sure whether I could sustain just writing it in order.
Right.
In fact, a friend of mine suggested, maybe at some point you can start writing from Z backwards.
Yeah.
If you're struggling. But it seemed to be, I did 3 A songs and then into the Bs, and there's lots of B songs, Bs, and lots of Bs, Cs and Ds for some reason. So I was toiling away in the Bs, Cs and Ds for a long time, but I seem to be able to keep going. And there are some bits of the book which were written a long time ago that I used. There's some tour diary entries that were written at the time that I went and adapted, but I started to get a plan of how things would work. So I wanted to keep writing it in order so that I could just keep a track. I didn't want it to be totally random, so I started to think of a structure. So there's a tour, there's a tour diary chapter early in the book, and I wanted to have that also in the second half. So I started thinking about the architecture as well, but just plodding along through the alphabet.
Right. But were you thinking like, I've got to get Mum and Dad in at some time, I've got to get Sydney in, like themes that you thought I've got to loop in, or did you just let it go?
No, So you're doing I was thinking things like that. I knew I had an entry point to talk about family history through. I wrote "I Close My Eyes," directly based on something my mother had said about my dad about wanting him to join him in heaven. So I knew that song would be. I can tell the story of Mum and Dad in that song, but go further back and tell the story of further generations of family history. So I sort of had a few, but I didn't write. I didn't go and write that then. I waited till I got there, till I got to I, and then said that's where I'm going to do it. So I had a few. I knew I was going to write about writing for women, for Sweet Guy. So I knew when I get up there, I can talk about folk music and writing across genders and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And how long did this take?
2 years. So March 2008 I started, and I had a first draft into the publishers after about 15 months, and then I found the first part of the book was quite bitty, or I got hit my stride as I seemed to write longer pieces as I went on. Right. So then I went back to the start of the book and rework. I did much more reworking of the early chapters than the later ones. Right.
So is this the main thing you've done over the last 2 years?
Yeah.
It's been the focus.
Oh yes, yeah. It's been. I had to set aside the time and sort of go to work each day and tap away.
Right. And the title. Why did you pick that song as the title? How to Make Gravy.
The chapter that talks about how to make gravy talks about a few things that are running themes throughout the book. I mean, there's it's about Christmas, so it talks about family, about influences and
Right.
you know, getting an idea for a song from hearing another song, and you know, just gravy is a bit of this and a bit of that, and it's kind of improvised. So
Right.
I thought it had the right sort of feeling as a title for the book.
Right. I want to start with, at the beginning of the book, before you know you start writing yourself. There's two quotes at the start of the book. One is by the French filmmaker Jean-Luc Godard, and the other is by who I know, not personally, but I know who he is. And the second one is by someone I don't know. Can you pronounce his name? Or try.
I'll probably say it wrong too. Czesław Miłosz, Polish poet.
And the quote from him, because I always find it fascinating, you know, like there's often quotes at the start of a book, and writers must know this is the first thing someone reads, and they're always there for a reason, which I'm going to ask you. But I'll read the quotes first. I'll read the second one first by the Polish guy. I have read many books, but I don't believe them. When it hurts, we return to the banks of certain rivers. Why is that at the start of the book? What does that mean?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what he means, and I don't think you can reduce poetry, because it is a poem, to
Right.
meaning. But
Right.
to me, I've read certain books, but I don't believe them. I thought that was an interesting thing to say ahead of a memoir.
Yeah.
I think it's a book that the form of the book does give the reader an expectation of truth-telling.
Yeah.
And I think it was just makes a nice point about that any kind of memoir is a version of the truth. So that line rang well for me, and I like what he says about rivers. It's just
Right.
something I always do when I'm travelling, is always try to find the river or the water, whether it's you're on a coastal town or any town. Every big town's got a river usually. So
That comes through a couple of times in the book where you're on tour, or you know, like you go and you do that.
yeah. So I'm always attracted to water, because I like swimming. So I always try to find a beach wherever I go, and the river's also a great way to orient yourself in a new city. It's a way of mapping out the city to work out where you are, where's north and south, and to find the river. So that's sort of just a habit of mine when I go somewhere new.
And the Goddard, I'm going to guess, the Goddard quote is, a story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. And which is a great quote. And I'm guessing you're putting that there because that is in a way what the book is. It's letting the reader know that the first line is not "I was born in Adelaide" and you know in 1955, and it's just going to go that the book's cut up.
Yeah, that's exactly why it's there.
Right.
It's just to give a little clue that okay, this is going to jump around in time.
Right. I got the book, and I had a pen in my hand, and I got the book in a couple of weeks ago, and I was going to like write notes and as I read, and like ask, like bang 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 big exclamation, why, Paul, what do you mean here? And I found that I'd read 60 pages, and the pen hadn't touched the page. And after about 60 pages, I was aware of that. I was enjoying the book. I was following it, things I didn't know, things I did know, but it all just seemed to go in beautifully. And I started to get worried that I was going to read the whole book and I wasn't going to write anything in any page. But then the very first thing...
You didn't write down, go and look up Miloš, Czesław Miloš?
No, there were things I didn't know, but then I knew I was going to meet you and I was going to ask you. But no, And so, but then the pen came down on this. This was the very first thing that I just went, question mark. I'll read it to you, okay? This is the first thing in the book that, like there was things I didn't know, but this was the first big thing I didn't know. And this is the first thing that I wanted to ask you after reading 85 pages of the book. And it was this. It's on the song Cradle of Love. There is one Australian, however, who justifies the label iconic, embodying the idea of a fixed image of devotion. Born David Gordon Kirkpatrick, he changed his name when he was 11 to Slim Dusty. He was already making the painting. He had the picture in his head, studied Jimmy Rogers, and made his first commercial record in 1946 at the age of 19. Tell me about Slim Dusty. Why is he an icon? What does he mean to you? And you go on and you say that you play with him. And I'd just like to know what that was like and why that's there.
Well, Slim, you can definitely hear the, Jimmy Rogers in his earlier recordings. Mm-hmm. There's yodeling and so on, but he's unmistakably Slim there then, and he didn't chop and change. He didn't follow fashion. He just sort of got his thing, and he kind of just stuck to it, and straight storytelling. Mm-hmm. So, the point I was making was that's more an icon is usually something that doesn't change. Doesn't change. So, and he inspired incredible devotion. Yeah. And I noticed that's something you notice when you go out bush to play, and we've done a lot of touring out bush, and every time you go and play in Aboriginal communities, you get asked to play Slim, and so you better have a couple of Slim songs with you if you want to get over. So, so
is he undervalued in the city?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe he's. I think he would have spent most of his touring outside the cities, obviously doing shows in the city, but he and Joy, his wife, they went everywhere, so the bulk of their touring was through cities. Right. So that thing with Slim, people remember when, Slim came to town, it was sort of, it was like a festival, a one-man festival, Slim coming to town, and the whole town would come out and go to it.
There's a great thing in the book where you're about to go on stage, I think it's somewhere near Darwin, and two guys, like obviously old sort of cattlemen or farmer guys, just come up to you and go, play some Slim. And you know that's meant, like that is implied that they want you to do that.
Yeah, it was more of an order, not a request.
Yeah, exactly.
That was at Yuendamu.
Right.
Which is north of Alice.
And you met him? You knew him?
Yes, so I probably met him maybe in the mid-90s.
Right, okay.
And, or maybe a bit earlier. Mm-hmm. Ended up being on the bill with him a few times. And, really, again, sort of, like his songs, he was straight ahead, very, very friendly, open. Right. And quite sort of had this authority, and quite sort of sure of himself and what he was doing. And you also got the sense he wouldn't take fools that lightly either. Right. But I really loved his wife Joy too. She used to have a yodeling group with her sister Heather, right. And they made great sort of yodeling records. And they started up. She kept on doing that music with her sister as well as with Slim. So they were a family group that had Heather would be part of the show as well, and then later on the children. So Anne Kirkpatrick, their daughter, and their son David, and they all made records and made music as well, and came on tour. They just so when you playing with them or being on a bill with them, you just felt part of the family.
Right. But that's something I want to ask you is, like, your career was, like this is an aspect of your career I wanted to ask you about. You have a Melbourne period, in the late 70s, early 80s, and then you have a Sydney period, and you don't stay in the cities. Like when you start to get successful and you get a band, you go out and play in the country, and I was just wondering, a lot more than, like the Go-Betweens did or the Church did, bands around that sort of time, you really got out there and played. And I was wondering, what drew you to it? Like talking about Slim Dusty there, what got you out to play in regional areas and really get out into the middle of Australia? What drew you to that?
It's just curiosity, wanting to go to places and see what they're like.
Right.
Partly that. It was also, it's hard to play those places unless you have some degree of commercial success, because otherwise it would just cost you too much to go. You would lose money to go there. Yeah. So I was lucky enough in the late 80s to have songs on the radio, and we could go to not a large country town and get enough people to make it worth our while. Yeah. So that was those practical reasons, but that we had the desire to go as well. I mean, all the others in the band too. They were, Steve Connolly in particular was really interested in history and so going around to places and finding out the story of the other towns, and we got offered to do an outback tour of Northern Territory in 1988, fairly early on in the piece, and that opened a lot of things up for us, because we met lots of people, lots of young bands on communities playing music, and that sort of just led to getting invited to other places. So you start the ball rolling that way, and then other sort of you get asked, "Oh, do you want to come and play? And, we can do a run Derby, Broome, Port Hedland, and down the coast." And that's never been to that part of Australia before, right. And said okay, and then you get a promoter organises you to do a week and a half up the west coast. This is it's like instead of join the Navy and see the world, it's like join a band.
Yeah. And it's songs like Before Too Long and Dumb Things and To Adore that are getting you out there. That's the key, in a way.
Yeah. It was having songs that were that popular that you could go somewhere and know you're going to get a crowd.
Okay, I don't want to hang too long on your career, but there's one really fascinating thing about it to me. Is that, and it's in the book, and if I'm not wrong, there's nothing here in these songs until you're 30, and that's right, pretty much right.
I did 2 records before I was 30.
I know, but they aren't in there.
Yeah,
and because like when you think of, if you said to, like any other, I struggle to think, but any other entertainer in the world, and you said, okay, you're going to write a book, or you're going to do a greatest hits, and nothing you do in the book or on the record on the greatest hits is before you're 30. You think of the career of Elvis, everybody, and it'd just destroy anything that they could do, because most of what they do is before they hit 30. But you push away and start at 30. And why? Why do you start at that cutoff point with Post? Why? It seems a deliberate decision.
Well, I didn't start. I started writing songs or trying to write songs much earlier, but probably maybe a bit later than other people who started bands. I was sort of a late developer in many ways, so I was slow. And I didn't start playing guitar till I was 18, and I didn't write a song till I was 21. I made a couple of records before I was 30,
Yeah.
but
You're just not happy with them.
weren't happy with them, and
Right.
didn't really like them that much. You know, not even that much after I made them. So, you know, it's like with all records you make, you might like it at the time, and then a couple of years later you can't stand to listen to it. But I was sort of not quite. You know, I didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, Post was the first record that I felt that I sort of had something that, you know, that I had my own sort of patch of ground. So I sort of consider Post my first record, and
Right.
the first two records, Manila and Talk,
Right.
I'll quite happily just sort of throw them in a ditch,
Right.
cover them up. So
Right.
they've been deleted for a long time, so
Yeah.
I'm not in a hurry to undelete
Right.
them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's great because it means that the first, you know, like great, you know, when you come through, you're 30 and you've seen a lot, you've lived a lot, which, you know, is great for your first batch of songs. And it separates you, you know, from everyone else who's, you know, 20, 21, 22, you know, like first love, first disappointments. You jump, you know, like there's life and life lived in the first songs that, you know, get your recognition, which is handy.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that at making a jump, you know, because I was playing and making records along the way. You know,
Right.
it's more. I think that kind of thing seems more obvious in retrospect.
Right.
And you know, obviously because haven't been, you know, I haven't re-released those old records
Right.
either. So it's just, for me, Post is like my, you know, I sort of consider it, I know it's not true, but I consider it my first
Right.
record.
It's a tough attitude. It's just like, bang, no, this is where it starts.
Well, yeah, that's for if I was going to, you know, say, you know, that's the thing about you make records or you write books,
Yeah.
they're around forever. So those first two records are out there. I'm sure people can
Oh, right.
find them, but I'm not going to make it easy for them.
Okay.